Keir Starmer is set to give a speech on Tuesday telling us all that there will be economic pain to come on top of their refusal to cut the two-child benefit cap, on top of them cutting the winter fuel allowance for many pensioners who need it. Lots of phrases have been thrown around over the last few days, like unpopular decisions and tough choices and rubbles and ruin, referring to the mess that the Tories have left them in. All the usual stuff around the carousel. But on Tuesday, the speech is being described as a direct message to the working people across Britain. He will say that the rot left behind by the Conservatives is so deep and so much worse than he had imagined, and that improvement will not happen overnight. The Prime Minister will make the extraordinary claim that those who took part in the recent riots were doing so because they knew society had been left broken and then there were not enough prison spaces. Not having enough prison spaces is about as fundamental as a failure as you can get, he will say. Those people throwing rocks, torching cars, making threats. They didn't just know the system was broken, they were betting on it. They were gaming it. They saw the cracks in our society after 14 years of populism and failure, and they exploited them. And that's what we have inherited. Starmer is set to give the tough messages in a speech before the return of MPs to Parliament on the 2nd of September, and is setting the stage ahead of the difficult decisions and tax rises that they're probably going to announce. And here is Pat McFadden just today priming us for the speech ahead.
He's going to say the country faces major challenges and they're not going to be solved overnight. And that's a departure from some of the snake oil that's been sold to people in recent years. But we are making change.
Sources also commented to The Guardian further, stating that he will say his government has inherited not just an economic black hole, but a societal black hole, adding that this is why we have to take action and do things differently. Part of that is being honest with people about the choices that we face and how tough this will be. He will say, frankly, things will get worse before we get better. Curtis, what do you think of all this? Are we being too hard on Labour because they've just been dealt a terrible hand? Or are they mishandling this handover of power?
I think we've been too soft, actually, and I'm one of the biggest critics of the Labour Party. And I try to find goodwill where I can. I try to, say if they do something good, I'll call it out. But no, we're going too easy on them. Look, when they talk about tough decisions, we all know what that means. It means going after working class people or poor people. It's never after the rich. And I hate it when politicians say they are making tough decisions because it's always the same. Now, there's no point talking about the 14 years of Tory failure when you don't have the policies to fix it. So if you say, well, we couldn't deal with the riots effectively. Now, I'm not exactly saying we should have so many more police on the streets, but who was it that promised more police officers or more bobs on the beats? It was Jeremy Corbyn, because he didn't want austerity. So even on a social conservative policy, if you want to call it that, they can't even make promises in that way because they don't want to spend the money. Now, all these things happening when it comes to the riots, when it comes to community discohesion, obviously the media plays a huge role in it, but austerity is the fundamental issue. It's the fundamental issue that brings all of this and ties all of this together. But this is a Labour Party that supports austerity. And now they're saying to us people, things are going to get worse before they get better. Well, I'm sorry, but they didn't say that when they were campaigning to become the government. They were saying, okay, we can't do everything that we want because the Conservatives have destroyed the economy, but we are going to immediately try to improve people's conditions. They said they were going to freeze the energy prices before the election. And now look, energy prices are going up and Labour are doing nothing about it. And all other areas, when it comes to investment, when it comes to inequality, they're not going to do anything because they're blaming the Conservatives. Now, this is what the Tories did for 14 years. Even right up until the election that just passed, they were saying, well, if the Labour Party hadn't crashed the economy or Gordon Brown sold all the gold reserves, we wouldn't be in this mess. And we're like, guys, get over it. It's been 14 years. At what point do you take responsibility? Well, this is going to happen with the Labour Party now. And I was reading an article and Keir Starmer said, maybe 10 years before we can actually start making some real changes here. So essentially, they're going to have almost as long as the Conservatives in power, and they're still going to make excuses. Now, there are so many things they can do about this. They talked about tax rises. Now, I do support capital gains tax going up, but these are sort of tinkering around the edges. Why not introduce a wealth tax like the Green Party has called for years? Why not restore the income tax, the top rate of income tax to 50%? It's at 45%. It's not even a tax rise, it's just restoring a tax cut. What about corporation tax? There are so many things we can leverage to get more income in order to pay for things. And that's, by the way, I'm even using the wrong economic framing because we actually don't need to do that. And this could be an entirely different show, but to be very brief about this, we are very lucky that we have the Bank of England. We are an economic powerhouse. We can spend pretty much almost what we like, especially when interest rates are low. I know they're not as low as they used to be back in 2015, but essentially there's no excuse to say, well, we can't spend some money to fix society's ills. We don't. Our economy isn't like a household budget, like Rachel Reeves and people in the media like to say. We can just do it now. The reason to increase tax rises on the rich is more about equality or reducing inequality rather than actually needing that money to spend money on it. But I understand, given that most people have been taught that economics is like a household budget, I understand that a social democratic party won't start talking about modern monetary theory and all these sorts of things, which is why I was absolutely fine with John McDonnell between 2015 and 2019 saying, well, we are going to invest in public services. We are going to renationalize certain industries, but we're going to do it. We're going to pay for it by taxing the rich. In terms of policy, it's exactly the same if you want to invest and also reduce inequality. But the reasons behind it may not be correct. But I'm absolutely happy for a Labour Party to say that. Rachel Reeves has completely boxed herself in because she's done these ridiculous fiscal rules, and she's so politically she has no political nous, nor does Keir Starmer or anyone in the front bench, that they didn't realize that was going to bite them on the arse. Because now they're in a situation because they're waiting for the economy to grow in order to pay for these things, and the economy isn't growing. I wonder why. They can't do the things they said they were going to do, and the things they said they were going to do were bare minimum, and they're even breaking those promises.
What frustrates me about all of this as well is that, Kia's talking about problems like, prisons. It's like, oh, it's Tory failure is the reason that we're in this situation. So what's going to be an issue further down the line now under a Labour government if they want 10 years? Like, so if we talk about the two-child cap benefit, right? If we know that people are going to be kept in poverty, what do we know about people who are kept in poverty? They're more likely to be economically inactive. They're more likely to commit crime. They're more likely to fail school. They're more likely to go to prison. So why, if you're talking about long-term planning, why are you going to keep people in poverty, right? These people should be the absolute priority. And that's why we should absolutely go after the rich and do these wealth taxes. People forget again during the pandemic, we all saw the headlines constantly about how much these billionaires made during the pandemic, not just from obviously just the contracts and stuff like that. We're talking about Michelle Moan. We're talking about like the actual full blown like investors and billionaires, like Amazon, everything from Amazon to these massive companies, even Tesco, supermarkets, Sainsbury's. They were claiming, oh, we have to put up the price rises because of all these supply chain issues. Well, they've gone now. And guess what? The prices are still high and they haven't gone back down. It makes no sense. I think I saw just last week that some CEOs' pays have doubled in the last 4 or 5 years. It's absolutely disgusting in the face of everything that we're doing. And what, does Rachel Reeves think capital flight's actually real when we know it's absolute bullshit? If any billionaires want to walk out of this country, it's going to be what, one or two if we go after their wealth just a little bit. Capital flight is just a myth. We should absolutely go after these people. We should go after the CEOs. We should go after the shareholders and just take back some of that money that they made from us that we're paying back for decades through our taxes. And they've absolutely found their wallets. I can't even remember the actual statistic of how much money like the top 1% actually made during the pandemic period, but I can't remember it, but it was absolutely insane. And it's about time that we claw some of that back.
Well, some headlines were saying that the rich doubled their wealth during COVID, a time when a lot of us were locked down. Some people couldn't even see their own friends and family. And you had corporations, you had individual billionaires actually making more money because of all of this. And it's crazy that no serious politician wants to really look at the issues of inequality. Now the thing is, it's a popular message to say tax the rich to pay for things. Majority of people in this country support that. All polls show that's the case. Majority of conservative voters actually support quite or fairly left-wing economic policies. So it's an easy message to sell. And we've been essentially gaslit by all the people in the Labour Party or the front bench, all the Blairites, the Starmerites, the Labour Together, the Tony Blair Institute guys say, well, we can't do these good things because you can't get elected. You can't be elected on the left wing platform. You have to be right wing to get elected. And obviously, since the beginning of this argument, which has been going on for decades, I've always said it's an excuse. They just don't support these left wing policies. You'll see if they get into government. And so many people were saying, oh, no, no, don't worry. Keir Starmer's actually a radical socialist, or he's actually going to like support some really good left wing policies. He's not. In fact, he sounds incredibly conservative. He sounds like David Cameron 2.0. I happen to believe, by the way, that David Cameron is to the right. Sorry, Keir Starmer is to the right of David Cameron because he's adopted his economic policy whilst also being more transphobic. I mean, he's more socially conservative than the Conservative Party 15 years ago. So that's where we are now. But people support taxing the wealthy or taxing the rich in order to pay for these things, and it's very easy to sell that to public because they're open about it. But if the Labour Party don't address the material needs of everyday people, then all what's going to happen is you're going to see the rise of reform. We've seen them rise already. They're on 5 seats. They're going to get even more, and all you're doing is fueling that party because where does reform come from? It comes from anger with the establishment. The left tried to tap into this with Jeremy Corbyn between 2015 and 2019. Bernie Sanders tried to do the same thing in 2016. Now, I understand we are in a slightly different place than we were back then, but there was something there and people were responding to it. Now there's a complete vacuum of just centre left social democratic policies of investment, of increased taxation, the very bare minimum. We don't have anything there, but what we do have is the Labour Party leaning into reactionary views on immigration, pandering to reform, which, by the way, isn't going to stop them from rising, is only going to give them more oxygen and legitimize their arguments. And there is no left wing alternative there. So I don't know whether these guys don't understand that this is what's happening or they do and they don't care. Who knows? But one thing is for sure when it comes to tax rises, when it comes to reducing inequality, when it comes to looking after the very poorest in society, those in control of the Labour Party are not interested. Principally, they're against these policies, and that's why they won't do it.
What's really funny as well is that, since Labour have come into power, we've now joked, but it's objectively true that the Liberal Democrats are now obviously further left than Labour. And you mentioned Bernie Sanders. So, over the last week, if you actually look at the Democrats' new platform under Kamala Harris, the Democrats are officially now more left than the British Labour Party, which is
Yeah.
wild because for years people have joked that the left in America, if the Democrats came over to the US, most of them would probably fit very well under like David Cameron's Conservative Party, right? Now we've got Kamala Harris saying that she's going to use federal power to go after price gouging. She's going to do $5 trillion worth of taxes over 10 years to pay for stuff like child tax credits. It's wild. It's like this is what we want. Can we not have this, please? Because it's just wild now that we're at a point where the Labour Party, I can't emphasize this enough, the Labour Party are now more to the right than the US Democrats and the and the Liberal Democrats in the UK. What alternative reality are we living in?
I
It
mean,
just I can't.
in terms of the US, there's two things that's the driving force behind this. One is Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders went from a nobody in 2016, and within 6 months, he nearly clinched the nomination against Hillary Clinton. Now, I still maintain to this day that the
Mhm.
Democrats rigged that election. Now, when I say
Yeah.
rigged the election, I don't mean they like changed votes and illegally did anything, but they did a lot of things where they briefed to the media that Bernie Sanders was an atheist, and we all know in the US, religion is very important. There were rules that are brought in where you had to be a registered Democrat 6 months before a primary was happening. And in those areas, Hillary Clinton obviously did better because the traditional Democrats were more moderate, whereas there are many independents who wanted to join the Democratic Party to vote for Bernie Sanders. And in states where you could literally sign up as a Democrat there and then and get the ability to vote, people supported Bernie Sanders. So it was very rigged against him. However, I
Yeah.
digress. he managed to galvanize millions of people across the country. And what he did is he infiltrated the Democratic Party. Now he's still an independent, but he essentially is a Democrat with a lot of sway.
Mhm.
And obviously, that pressure has worked on the DNC. The second reason is unions. Now, of course, the US has had a period where unions were assaulted. I mean, when we had Margaret Thatcher, they had Ronald Reagan, they had their awful neoliberalism, but arguably we actually probably had the worst brunt of it because Thatcher was
Mhm.
so aggressive against unions. She wanted to destroy them forever. Whereas in the US, there is still is a stronger union movement where Democratic politicians, even not particularly left wing ones, will still say, well, I'm strong on unions. Even Republicans will say, well, I'm strong on unions. Even if they're not actually strong on unions, rhetorically, they want to be seen as that. They want to be seen as pro worker. Whereas over here, the Labour Party actively denounce unions. I mean, you're kicking Sam Tarry out of a job because he stood on a picket line. So whereas Keir Starmer is very happy to say, fuck the unions, essentially, I want the billionaire backers, the DNC are still like, well, the unions have a lot of pressure here. So those two things have contributed to I don't want to say leftward shift, but a essentially listening to the base,
Yeah.
because usually the Democrats laugh at the base and the GOP are scared of their base. Same as over here, the Conservatives listen to their base, unfortunately, and the Labour Party hate their own base. The DNC, we have seen a slight shift that they're willing to listen, but that's that's neither here nor there. What matters is in power. But you're right. In terms of the policy platform from Kamala Harris is very good. Appointing Tim Walz is very good. He's a very good governor in Michigan or Missouri? I can't
Um,
remember which one it was,
oh
but
god, is it Minnesota? Oh my god, I've
oh,
literally
sorry,
forgotten.
Minnesota. Yeah, that's right,
Minnesota,
Minnesota.
yeah.
And he's passing legislation such as free school meals. Again, something that Keir Starmer doesn't want to do across the country. So they're the two things that America is doing right. Lessons that we should be learning from, but Keir Starmer obviously won't listen. I'm excited to say that Turn Left has significantly grown this year. And with that, we've managed to produce far more ambitious content, interviewing high profile people. We did a 12-hour live election show. There are multiple people behind Turn Left, but we are still working around our full-time work. But we would love it if this was our full-time. It means we could dedicate so much more and to bring even more ambitious content. So if you've been here from the beginning or you've only recently become a viewer, if you like what we do, then you can help us out. Please like and share this video. Make sure you drop a comment. We want to hear your thoughts. We want to hear your feedback. And we desperately need more independent media. If you want to see a socialist media alternative thrive, then you could be part of that. So if you can, you could support us on Patreon for £3 or £5 per month, or any one-off donation. We can use that money to upgrade our equipment, to rent out a proper studio, and to start paying ourselves. This is only the beginning. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Patreon.com, Turn Left Media. Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you, Turn Left.